The ground staff at the German airline Lufthansa are staging a one-day walkout today, leading to the cancellation of thousands of flights across Europe, adding to all of that ongoing travel disruption across the continent. Eoghan Corry, editor, Air Travel Magazine, joins us on the line now. How disruptive is this strike, Eoghan?
Oh, good morning, Philip. It's pretty empty in Terminal 1 in Frankfurt. I just had a look at it a few minutes ago. 725 of the 1,160 flights through Frankfurt, and 345 flights lost in Munich. Also, just from Dublin point of view, we've lost all of the Lufthansa schedule today. The 2 early morning flights, the afternoon to Frankfurt and the evening to Frankfurt, and an evening flight to Munich, all rotations in both directions. It's a one-day strike. There could be more to come. It's the ground handlers union that are looking after Lufthansa, and it is part of a pattern, Philip. We've seen air traffic control in France and Marseille and in Italy, and we've also seen different strikes through Europe. A little bit of good news, though. The Scandinavian SAS pilots, some listeners affected by those strikes in recent weeks, that has been solved. The ground handlers in Charles de Gaulle, which would have been a pretty big and disruptive one, that's been solved. And Ryanair have signed union agreements with Britain and Spain in the last and Portugal in the last few days. So some things being sorted out, but there is a lingering air of discontent. A lot of people had salaries reduced during COVID and have difficulty getting their money back. So workers in airports and airlines through Europe a little bit disgruntled this summer.
The Oireachtas Transport Committee heard yesterday, Eoghan, that there's almost 4,200 lost bags in Dublin Airport. How long is it going to take them to sort this out?
It's going to take a while, because not only is there that mountain, I think Lynn Embleton talked about it climbing a sandhill. There are about 500 more a day being lost. One of the ground handlers put the figure at about 270 on their side. Some of it's knock on the bags that came as far as Frankfurt and Heathrow and didn't get put on those aircraft. To give an example, every Heathrow aircraft coming in now has about 30 bags, which are delayed bags from previous flights. And while what Dublin Airport has been doing is they've transferred all of their mountain of bags, or as much as they can every day, to a holding site near the airport. But that means that the couriers, and it's not just the Aer Lingus van that drives up and down delivering your bags. That was always the case when about 50 bags a day got lost. But DHL have been hired in, and a lot of couriers going with bags around the country. But for each delivery, more bags are getting lost. It's not going to go away anytime soon, especially when Heathrow issued a statement this week saying their problems are expected to linger into next year.
I would imagine that people are responding to this by trying to bring their luggage on board with them, probably further contributing to delays?
Very much. There is an on-time departure issue right through Dublin Airport at the moment. One of them is that aircraft are waiting for bags to be loaded. They generally wait an hour and a half. We've had cases, particularly in Toronto, where the aircraft has taken off with no bags on board and flown to Dublin. But certainly it's a big challenge for people. How badly do you need what you're putting in that bag that you're putting in the hold, especially if you are pretty not sure you'll ever see it again? I know a couple of, there's loads of anecdotes of people who would never have checked in a bag, managing to get everything on their onboard luggage. And as you say, a little bit of problem getting that into the overhead hold, but it's very small compared with the massive problem of that mountain of bags. Not just Dublin. Hamburg had a problem. They had to move them out of the terminal because it was actually bringing the terminal to a halt. And Heathrow and Amsterdam are particularly bad spots at the moment.
Now, I'm a little bit confused because we seem to have conflicting advice from Dublin Airport Authority on the one hand saying turn up early for your flight, and now Aer Lingus saying yesterday, no, don't. That's just making things worse.
Yeah, there's not going to be agreement on this. Dublin Airport are not going to change that advice. 2.5 hours for short short haul, 3.5 for long haul. Long haul, in most cases in Dublin, means North America. So you do have an extra security check and you have the US immigration to get through. But there is a huge problem, and it's that more than 50% of the passengers in Dublin Airport are actually turning up ahead of that advice. As Lynn Embleton said yesterday to the Oireachtas Transport Committee, they are competing with people whose flights are leaving in a shorter period of time, clogging things up. That's not going to be solved by an appearance before the Oireachtas Transport Committee or even messaging from Dublin Airport. The breach of trust that happened at the end of May, Philip, when 1,400 people missed their flights, when they followed the Dublin Airport advice and the plane took off without them because the security queue was so long. People with families, people who've been cooped up for 3 years, they're not going to put anything to chance. And we are still going to have that situation where people are turning up 4, 5, 6, 7 hours in advance for flights.
It has been the case, Eoghan, that all of this chaos in airports, not just Dublin, but all around Europe and the world, has knocked the aviation emissions, carbon emissions story off the headlines. But we see now Ryanair announcing 170 million profit in the quarter between April and June. We see stories about Michael O'Leary's salary going back up to pre-pandemic levels. They're not going to be able to keep themselves out of the news, out of the headlines on this for much longer, are they?
Well, keeping themselves out of the headlines has never been an aspiration of Ryanair's. They profit this week, for Q1, the first of the 2 quarters in which they actually make money. They lose money in the winter. Compares with 1.1 billion lost in 2020 and 366 million lost in 2021. So they're returning to profitability at a scale which is less than 1/10 of where they were, the losses they made through COVID.
No, I appreciate that, but they're announcing profits,
right, Philip,
though.
is going to return to the centre of this. The problem with aviation is not just the fact that there are about 30,000 aircraft in the sky. They're responsible for something around 2% of emissions, but they're emitted at 6 miles up in the air where they do maximum damage. So there is certainly a lot of questions to be asked of the aviation industry, and they need to start focusing again on delivering the answers that particularly in Germany and Netherlands, that the climate and the climate activists and the green parties there are looking for.
Yeah, because the low carbon aviation fuels that have been promised are probably a long way off.
Way off, yeah.
How soon do you think it is before we can see the Commission's proposals for higher levels of taxation on jet fuel to actually kick in and start having an impact on passengers' aspirations to take 4 or 5 flights a year?
It's an interesting one because it's probably hugely much bigger debate and a much more easy political debate in Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium than it is in the peripheral countries like Ireland, like Portugal, like Norway, where if you curtail travel, which is what you're talking about, return to high price aviation where only a small number of people travel by air, it does have a knock-on impact for things like tourism and trading and our ability to trade, our ability to our key industries like pharmaceuticals and software and of course agriculture, which is all over the news this morning. So it is connectivity by air is not as big an issue in Germany and the Central European countries as it is in the peripheral countries. So what we have seen people in aviation in Ireland concentrate on is the fact that we have a newer fleet, that where the actual emissions, while they're still there, are a small proportion of what they would have be in prior to the latest technology that the A320 and the 737-800 introduced. That reduces the carbon burn to about 3 litres per passenger, which is something similar to a compact car. But the other thing COVID did was remove some of the big fuel guzzlers out of the sky, the 747, the Boeing 747, the jumbo jet of our childhood, a magnificent aircraft, beautiful to look at, but boy, it drank a lot.
The difficulty in balancing the economic issues here around tourism and the decrease in tourist numbers that might come from more expensive air travel is, it's an argument well made. But I wonder, in the current context of everybody seeking climate justice and the equal apportioning of whatever pain or sacrifice has to be suffered here, that the absence of taxation on jet fuel is just politically unsustainable.
We're not going to solve it this morning, Philip, but the straightforward answer to the tax on jet fuel is that the airlines will go wherever the tax is lowest. It's an issue that has, been well trashed out, and we've seen quite a few. It has evolved. It has evolved from that situation where it was absolutist arguments on both sides, which were, when I started covering travel, was pretty much the case, to much more engagement on the side of the aviation industry. The Corsair proposals that IATA put in place, the amount of time, energy, effort being put into sustainability by airlines, because they know they're against a wall on this, that they are disproportionate emitters of carbon. The developments on that have been pretty helpful. Whether it comes down to that sort of debate, whether we want to save the planet versus seeing the planet, or whether we can do both, I don't think we're going to solve that this morning. But it's a particularly interesting debate. I'll be I'll be travelling to a couple of conferences that will be discussing this. I will be travelling by air, of course, Philip, which probably to your ears somewhat defeats the purpose.
Well, I think you're owning your hypocrisy up front, and we were saying earlier on, we're all climate hypocrites by the very fact that we exist at all. One final point that's come in on the text 51551. Arthur makes what's probably a very, very helpful suggestion. When checking in at the check-in desk, the airline tag should include the passenger's phone number on the tag. Easier to track passengers thereafter and to link up to luggage. Something you could probably just do yourself.
Yeah, there are issues with tracking down the passenger. One of the things the airlines are telling me is that there's not much point going on to your phone line to your airline to know where the bag is, because sometimes they don't know where it is. Sometimes, in some cases, bags have been delivered to Dublin and put on another flight to Toronto, that sort of thing. The main thing is that the information is accurate. It's done online. It's done as quickly as possible. The technology is good. You get a case number. We do have also a problem of people, particularly those who arrive in Ireland, moving. They've moved twice or three times by the time the bag is delivered. And also, it does create a problem. The old waiting for the man to fix the washing machine. That's what waiting for the bag has become for the post-summer holiday experience for a lot of Irish people this summer.
Eoghan Corry, thank you very much.
Always a great pleasure, Philip.